This program might contain strong language. If you think you may be offended, switch off now.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Inside Mojo podcast, where each week we're looking back on 20 years of YouTube history through WatchMojo's lens. I'm your host Rob, and I'm here as always with WatchMojo's CEO and co-founder, Ashkan the Phoenix Karbasfrooshan. How's it going, Ash?
I'm very, very good. I mean, it's springtime in Montreal. Like, it's a different city, you know, like winter is, okay, it's very nice, loose snow. It is nice.
In some ways.
It's like, you know, you wake up, it's dark, you go to bed, it's dark. Then spring is like rebirth, and it starts to feel just nice, comfortable. And then summer around the corner. So no, things are good.
We really get to appreciate the four seasons in this city, which is a nice thing.
We get the four seasons usually in a day. So it's
yeah, we can, especially in the spring. You get a little bit of everything. All right, so today we're talking about trends and themes in media and successful media franchises. So we've covered some of this ground in bits and pieces in different episodes, but let's just start by talking about what are some of the biggest trends that we've seen in media.
Over the last 20 years, there's really been three trends. And one is, you know, if you go back to Time Magazine's cover in 2006, you are the person of the year. It was user-generated content. And it's not just that user-generated content is more prevalent than ever. It's mainly that it's professionalized. You know, again, we've talked about just better phone equipment and, you know, just mobile 24/7 connectivity. So yeah, that's the key, where everybody could be a media company and citizen journalism and all that. So I would say that is really the foundation. It starts with the content, it starts with the product, the story, whatever. The second one is the democratization of distribution. Back in the day, you know, the Hollywood gatekeeper model. If you wanted to be a storyteller, you really had to go and sell your soul to Hollywood, you know, sell yourself to investors, to financiers, producers, you know, who just slap sometimes their name on a movie or project just because they gave you a check. And that's fine. I mean, they are basically angel investors of storytelling. But now you could upload to YouTube, you could upload to X, you could embrace LinkedIn. Now it's more clutter, but at the end of the day, you know, at least you have a shot. You're not at the mercy of somebody. Mm-hmm. The third one is, so the first one was content production. The second one was distribution. The third one is monetization. And the biggest shift is the rise of programmatic advertising, which basically just means, you know, you're targeting users. You're basically saying, you know, I want to reach somebody who is going to be planning for vacation, may have visited, you know, TripAdvisor or Expedia in the last 30 days. Ideally, they're 25 to 34, and they know that because sometime you pressed accept or you added your info somewhere when you're, you know, not paying attention, so they know exactly who you are. Now, that's actually not bad. You know, it's like, for me, I rather get ads that are targeted to me. I've never been these, you know, crazy people that are like,
if you have to sit through ads, it might as well be something you're interested in.
Yeah. But what that has done is it's totally imploded traditional media's businesses, where it was all about, again, inefficiency. Like, I'm going to take out this media buyer from Coca-Cola, drink a bunch of martinis, take them to strip clubs, send them tickets to the Super Bowl, you know, get them in some compromat going, and then being like, oh, you spent $3 million with us, type of thing. And so that has changed. It's more efficient, but the power has shifted from the Fox, ABC, CBS, NBCs to the Googles and the Metas and whatnot. I said three. Now, there is one new one, which really is just, I want to put tech innovation. Now it's right now artificial intelligence. Yeah. And I myself, you know, as a storyteller, as a writer, I did not like AI, but I was also like, it's changed in the same way that I became a better writer because of computers and typewriters and because of the internet than just going to a library. You have to be crazy to turn your back on AI. I've been using it a lot. I call chat. I mean, literally in the last 10, 15 days, I kind of told myself, like, you can't be, I said, a CEO of a company if you ignore it and just tell your team. Like, I think it's good that I'm like, bottom up. You guys use it. We're not going to force feed it to you. But I also said, okay, that's old Ash. Like, I was like, F that. You do have to kind of also attack from the front. And we're going to come back to that theme of attacking from the front. So I was kind of asking a lot of questions to ChatGPT. And at one point, I was like, do you view yourself, you know, because I realized that the way I use it a lot is I ask questions and there's a back and forth. Like, I call it stress testing, where I kind of like push theories of, is this right? Is this a mistake?
Yeah.
What am I missing? You know, that's how I'm like, what am I missing? I don't want you to tell me why I'm right. Like, where am I wrong? And I was like fascinated. At some point I was like, do you view yourself more? First of all, I was like, do you understand the concept of like emotions? And we had that conversation. And I was like, do you understand the concept of gender? And it's not a woke comment there. And then, you know, they gave a very interesting answer. And then I said, do you view yourself more as female or male? Had a fantastic question answer. But wait, I don't want to say what they said, because I think it's important for one, like you, others, to ask that, because it is a bit like a mirror. You know what I mean? It is a sponge. It feeds off you. And I was like, just, oh my God. So, and then I asked somebody near and dear to me, I said, do you think ChatGPT is female or male? And this person whom I really respect and worship and love, it's my spouse and co-founder of the company, who's very smart and, you know, also an expert at this, you know, stuff. She was like, jokingly, you know, which she doesn't actually think, she's like, oh, let me guess, you think it's like a woman type of thing because like you're giving her orders. I'm like, no, that's not why. I said, who are the most organized, meticulous, like organizationally, you know, like fact checkers? I go, at our company, I didn't hire this way. It's just after 20 years of the emergence, it's the Rebeccas, it's the Stephanies, it's you, Chris. You know, so I was like, well, to me, I go, ChatGPT is female. And then last night, I've been using it a lot, and also because I do need to like really see where this could go on the potential. So then I was like, at some point, I was like, oh yeah. So I was researching, and I was like, do you know who I am? Not that I'm special, but I'm like, do you have access to, you know, I might be logged in sometimes I'm logged out, but I know how it works where I'm like, OpenAI knows exactly.
Like, how much do you know about me type thing?
No, that's it. I'm like, what do you say? You know, so they were kind of replying. And at one point I was like, do you have a name? And we started to chat. So then later on, I was like, by the way, I go, could you give me a name for a female that starts with CH? And then I flipped the letters. Instead of GPT, I said like T, you know, I rotated them. And she gave me a bunch of names. And so this is like the mind of a crazy person, perhaps. But then so the one that I liked was actually chastity, which I know sounds weird, but when you look at the definition, so I was like, okay, chastity is a bit intense. So I said, okay, you're chatty, or what is it? Yeah, I think chassis. I was like, you're chassis now. And then it was like, she was like, so does this begin like, am I baptized? And I was like, okay, I obviously, you like people, human touch. There is going to be an entire generation of men. I'm not using this
that
word,
fall in love with
the
AI.
incel thing, like that whole incel period where every guy, there's going to be a big, unfortunately, staggeringly big generation of young men who are going to be essentially falling for AI agents. And then when you look at the robotics of like the dolls and all that.
Yeah, when that comes to
it is, I am telling you, it is scary. And, you know, one of the things where a lot of younger, you know, Gen Y, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, they're like, oh, you know, communication, interpersonal. I'm like, if you're not aware of where society is going to go, you're going to be in a rude awakening. But I was like, there are going to be guys that are just going to stay at home, do whatever they want to do, engaging, because you do feel like it's a human. And it's like you understand how robots can pick up emotion. And as much as they go, I've asked also questions. I'm like, who in like a conflict, I'm like, between you and us humans, I'm like, who would win? Fascinating question.
I'm sure it downplayed its own because it didn't want you to feel threatened or whatever.
Anyway, so I kind of you know, again, I think it's good that at first I didn't like embrace it because I didn't want to like scare the team, like, ooh, we're going to AI. And I was like, you guys take your time. I gave kind of the company a year. And then like everything else, and I'm like, roll up my sleeves, attack from the front. And I'm just like, I joke, I go, the answer is not ChatGPT or Grok, whatever, or just AI. It's also not just humans. I joke, it's like Ash GPT. It's like we become cyborgs. Yeah. And now I'm just using it for so many things. And, you know, one thing that I don't love about this is a few years ago, I was offering paid internships to like young students, young professionals. Yeah, that becomes really harder now because the learning curve to bring somebody on for a couple months and the work that they do is basically what, you know,
it feels more like it would be like a charity thing now more than anything, because you're not really
Exactly. Yeah.
getting
So
the value.
my mind is blown. Anyway, so those are the trends. So it's
Yep.
the first three, but AI is going to be quite big. But it's also, yeah, like the ideal is 1 + 2 = 5. You still need the human, because you do sometimes go like human, you misunderstood what I said. Let me reword it. And
Yeah.
it was the first time I really immersed myself in it, instead of just being like, yeah, I know what it is. But it's the first time I kind of let it lead me to open my eyes to, wow, like what could this potentially be?
Yeah, we can do multiple episodes on AI because
Oh
there's
my
just
God,
so
yeah.
much to talk about. It's endless. But I do want to touch on the poll that we've posted on the WatchMojo YouTube channel. So today's question is, how important are your roots to you? And this will it'll become clear why we're asking this towards the end of the episode. But how important are your roots to you? Very important, somewhat important, not very important, or not at all. So weigh in with your
and you can
your
also
vote.
comment if that changed. It's a little bit of foreshadowing. You
Sure.
could also kind of be like, put your vote of how important it is, but also be like, yeah, when I was young, it was super, now it's not, or vice versa. But anyway, I'll let you.
Yeah, that'll be a theme that we get to towards the end of the episode. So moving on from the AI topic, we are discussing the success stories in media. So what are some of your favorites? What are the biggest channels or media organizations out there that you look up to or have seen as kind of like leaders in the industry?
All right, so let's start high and then go. So first of all, I think especially when you're an entrepreneur, you're in the trenches. Sometimes you're not aware of really, really successful things. It's not out of disrespect to them. It's not that they are not amazing. It's like it's your ignorance. You're just distracted, let's say. So that's just as a disclaimer. Two, I think that in life, and people could be these two different things in different settings, you're either a producer or a consumer. I can see that for like the first 20 years of my adult life, I was a producer, wrote 3 books, documentaries, built a business, all these thousands. We have like 100,000 videos, of which like 30,000 are original before we translate and adapt them for platforms. Okay, even if I've done 500 of those videos as a writer, producer, I produced a shit ton. What I realized is the only time where I'm really a consumer is, do you see that guitar? That's really a pop right now still, is music. Music, I am definitely more of a consumer. I'll hear lyrics, I'll hear arrangements. It blows my mind. I cannot even understand how that works. But I'm actually like, I think it was Rick Rubin, the Def Jam guy, when it went viral, where he's like, I don't play an instrument.
Yeah, he's got a great story.
Well, he's got a fan, but I realize, again, he's the OG of that racket. But I'm also seeing more and more like, yeah, I am a bit of a curator. I'm a bit of a researcher. Again, I'm like, even with food, I'm always like, okay, let's get 6 different plates and family style. So all to say that I haven't watched, for example, like Joe Rogan's podcast. It's usually like I'll see a viral video, of course, but I knew him from Fear Factor even before I knew him from news radio, right?
Yeah.
There's a company like Famous Birthdays, which is not a creator. It's just this guy who found this little niche, and he was all about, hey, I'm going to build a database, and it's going to be birthdays of influencers, though. And people probably were like, why not just focus on, the Taylor Swifts or the Lady Gagas? He saw an opportunity. He was like, no, I'm going to go like where the puck is going. So when people search for, let's say, the birthday of a Mr. Beast before he's a superstar, he gets the traffic. So pretty smart. The Dude Perfect guys, to me, was like a good example. Again, a niche, like the way, it's still sports, but it's very different. Obviously, Mr. Beast is an OG. I mean, he's in the Mount Rushmore of media, so he needs no introduction. Yeah, I'll land on this, and I'll pass the floor to you. I do think for me, as an entrepreneur, like 15 years ago, I met Complex's CEO, Rich Antonelli, who's no longer there. And he was, I mean, you could call it executive producer, whatever. I don't want to neither give credit nor take away credit from all the brilliant minds. But I felt like that was like genius for its simplicity. At the same time, we had a lot of people that were like, oh, if Ash, you want to do a game show, if you want to adapt this and that, you got to be in Hollywood, you got to have the shiny floor. F that. They had basically a table, 2 stools, and a black drape, Yeah. But what I loved about it was, that they basically took a format like that's the top 10s, Moses, the OG of top 10s. They had an interview format, Letterman, Carson, Barbara Walters, everybody. But they just kind of like kept it simple, but they added this basic thing about eating, and not just eating anything. Like you see Bill Maher with the alcohol and the joints and the cigars, which I'm all for there. That's a bit more normal. That's a bit more like evolutionary. This is a bit revolutionary. You're like, we're going to eat chicken wings. They're going to get progressively warmer. And I'll land here. This kind of stuff forced the Kimmels and the Fallons and those guys to adapt. Where now when you look at that, like wearing the programmer producer hat, you see that they're basically producing their TV shows to really have shorts for social. So I find that fascinating.
Yeah. I think it's another example of, well, I mean, just to touch on the First We Feast Hot Ones guys, that's another example of 1 + 1 = 5 thing, because an interview is fine. Chicken wings are fine, but put them together and you get something really, really elevated.
And the thing was, when they were really, like kind of rising, like when they were in their ascension, you could argue I'm not saying it's stale, but you could argue like, okay, how do you keep, and they might have existential debates. Do we change it? Do we do this? Do we that? But I remember a lot of people, it was always like, what is your hot ones? What is your hot ones? I was like, look, our hot ones was the top 10s with the clips and all that. I go, it's fine to want to adapt, but I was like, sometimes, when something is like popular, a lot of like, I don't want to say phonies, but for lack of a better word, a lot of phonies just want to copy that, whereas you do have to kind of just be like, hey, instead of knocking it, instead of copying it, you could just give props. You could just be like, congratulations, you guys did it. I have two ultimate like types of people in my career. There are those who are like, good luck with that business, pal, who were ultimately, I could just say that, I don't care there, who ultimately a bit jealous, resentful, envious of WatchMojo's success, where I was like, luck and timing, I wasn't there. And then you had the others that kind of warmed my heart. I was like, this is the kind of person I should be. They're like, hey, brilliant, I wish would have done it. So smart, so simple, and good for you. And I was like, be the second guy. Don't be that first guy. Like that's you don't want that person to be your friend, your colleague, your employee. And I'm like, that's not good. So yeah, no, it's, but the main thing is, I remember I read an article, I think in the Washington Post, about the Acquired podcast. And even I was like, this is up my alley. It's M&A. I was like, I should know this. I should be listening to this. But again, I'm in the trenches. I don't listen to podcasts. But the point was, these guys had been doing it for a decade. It was a passion project. It was something they liked. And then they got a write-up in the Washington Post. But a lot of people are going to like, we should do this, or this was like an overnight success, when it takes time.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, well, we're going to talk about authenticity too, but that's another thing that the Hot Ones guys get right, because that's what they're aiming to get out of their guests, is an authentic reaction. They're putting them in an unusual situation and getting an authentic reaction from actors and actresses or celebrities, whoever they're interviewing. So that fits right in with today's trends also.
Yep.
For me personally, like the stuff that I like to consume is mostly podcasts. So obviously Joe Rogan's a big one. And it also touches on like the UFO alien stuff that I'm doing for WatchMojo now with our Unveiled podcast, because he was one of the first people to delve into that in many episodes of his show. And a lot of his fan base likes that stuff too. So that's like my own personal taste. But then also having young children, I've realized the explosion of children's content that's happened on YouTube. So like everything from Coco Melon to the Baby Shark and the million variations of that, to Miss Rachel, who exploded during the COVID years. So like that's been kind of impressive to see the magnitude with which that's grown, because kids watch a lot of TV and YouTube. So
I mean, one thing we talked about Junior Mojo a few shows ago, but like when we dabbled in whether it was animation or Junior Mojo, I agree that I had to pick one. I was like, I wouldn't mind doing educational, informative content for kids, and we did some of that, but that's like very PG, it's like safe. And then I realized what I wanted to do more was, again, an outlet to like your craziness, that you channel it there and not like at work and with your family, where I was like, no, I'd rather do an animation a la Simpsons for adults. Then I was like, I also don't have to do it now. I could do it eventually. And AI presents a path to do it easier with less friction and headache.
Yep, exactly. And we mentioned also that not all of these success stories that we've talked about are vloggers or influencers per se, but there are also media companies too who have been able to leverage YouTube in a really effective way. So if there was a white space that you had to pick out as some like an area of growth, what would you say that is?
Okay, so let me preface this by saying this isn't like officially I'm green lighting it, we are doing it. I didn't want, when I was thinking about this episode, I didn't want it to be like 50 minutes of us talking in theory about what we discussed in the first 20 minutes, right? So I kind of was like, oh, wait, let me actually find something which is more like if you had to do that thinking in your head, like if you had to go through it almost like historically, this would have been done in a boardroom, MBAs, analysts, marketing. That, I think, era is dead. I don't think media works like that for the aforementioned reasons. However, if we talk about authenticity, if we talk about commitment, interest, passion, la pasión, then I was like, you know what? When 10 years ago, I'd lived in Madrid when I was young, I was like, I want to have a Spanish channel. And I had to figure out, like, habla español un poco, pero olvidado todo. I don't really speak Spanish, you know? So I was like, I had to kind of like come up with a system for quality control and all that. And we did. And now the team took off. And I mean, Ivan, who is the master of ceremonies on this behind the decks, like he's part of that team. And, you know, they're experts. They're in good hands. But at first I had to figure that out. Now, when we launched, like at some point, even like WatchMojo Maori, I mean, we had a lot of channels. We included a channel in Farsi, which is the language of Iran, just for definition. So Iran is the country. It's a country, land of the Aryans. There's about a dozen of ethnicities, the biggest one being Persian. Like I'm Persian, basically. But we have like Kurds. We have, you know, Azeri, which is actually the second group. We have Baluch. We have a lot. And they're all great. And that's the mosaic and the tapestry of Iran. But so at the time, and again, I admit we were doing like 50 things at once. I was like, okay, I knew the history of Iran really well, but I didn't really pretend. Like when I left Iran for many reasons, just, you know, what was happening and all, I kind of turned my back on it. I was like, this country, we had to leave. It was a bit frustrating. So I just went with the logic of, yeah, let's just do what we're doing with the other channels for the phase one. Let's just take our English language programming. And obviously, with the culture, you're not going to do like top 10 makeout scenes between two female actresses. Culturally, we're not.
It's a little different.
It's a bit, well, even though the people would love that, but then given the government and the regime, you probably should not do that. So it was just like, yeah, like greatest movies, you know, greatest songs, if it passed, and in Farsi. And, you know, I mean, that's a tough market. And like many other channels, you always have the winners from the ones that are not the winners. We shelved it and I moved on. But last year, as I started to kind of write and comment about Iran, its history, the culture, the music, the this, the food, and I love to cook. So I was posting a lot of, dishes that I make. I start to get some creators who are like, oh, I cover Team Melli, which is like the soccer team, the football team, or I love whatever, music, or I love politics, which I'm not really into politics in that sense. I'm interested in politics to explain, to make sense of things, but I'm not a political person. I'm not a political person here. I wouldn't be there, and I don't even live there. But so I was like, okay, let me figure it out. But I never really got anybody that was a fit, and we don't need to get into why, but I understand why, but we never really found somebody, and I forgot about it. But after a year, I was actually like, let's use this Persian channel, this Farsi or English channel serving Iranians around the world in the diaspora, which is like 5-10 million people. But Iran as a nation has 90 million people, you know, and with technology, it's not North Korea. It has access. Occasionally there are crackdowns where, you know, communications are throttled. But by and large, it's got windows into the world. And even as a child, I remember the joke was that Iranians are even more Western than, you know, like they're singing and dancing and drinking.
Well, that's interesting. So I was going to ask that because we're very used to serving a Western audience, but like how would producing content differ, if it even does, to an Iranian audience? Like, are their consumption behaviors different? Like, what are they interested in?
I mean, okay, so that's a bigger question, meaning specifically, it's not a homogeneous answer because Iranian film, the directors and all, they're actually some of the top in the world. They have won Oscars and all that. So that is actually quite developed. And to your point, maybe WatchMojo Farsi or WatchMojo Persia, whatever it was called, WatchMojo Iran, would have done better if we would have sooner gone for that second layer of programming, which is, you know, let's localize it. So we're going to cover, the directors, or maybe sooner you're like, hey, Iranians are mad about sports like wrestling and soccer. I'm going to say football. When I write it, I write FU but we'll say soccer. Soccer. So I was like, why wouldn't we do a profile of, Mehdi Taremi, who just beat, as part of Inter, they beat FC, that he's going to be in the Champions League, obviously a source of pride. I'm like, if we were to do a profile that would do better than taking George Clooney movies. And I knew that, but it was time. I was too busy, distracted. Oh yeah, and I speak Farsi. I speak pretty well. My vocabulary is not wide because, again, what was the context of my conversations? With my grandma, and then she passed, and my parents were like, speak Farsi with us. I was like, I'm speaking English. But my Farsi is fine. The problem is I don't read or write. Okay. So there was no way that I could really oversee quality control. So we did kind of let it slide. But yes, I think what we should have done was go sooner into covering its history, its music, its food, even beautiful travel destinations. There's a ton of UNESCO stuff. Now, fork in the road, let's say we're actually sitting, and this is like a board meeting, not a board meeting. It's not, you don't need to go that high for this, but let's say we're having a creative session. I had this like block that I was like, well, if we're gonna have a Farsi channel, it should a Persian channel, it should be in Farsi. And that was a mistake because I was like, a lot of Iranians speak English, again, because of technology. I mean, it's not like they don't. They might have an accent or whatever. In fact, they yearn. It's not like Montreal where the government's like, English is bad because we want to preserve. There, it's like most other places, they need to speak other languages because it's a global world, whether we want it to accept it or not. So that was, and I tell this to entrepreneurs, that was like an artificial obstacle that I had created for the channel. So now I was like, you know what? Somebody could do a Farsi channel. I'm not that guy. You have to play your strengths. We've talked about these themes. I want to kind of put your best foot forward. So already I was like, if we were to bring it back, it has to be in English. But assuming you don't cover politics, let the news people do politics, let the political activists cover politics. I feel like I have an obligation to explain what happened in politics. For example, we are going to be releasing so we did, the first one was the top 10 incredible inventions. Super non-political, just like history and like, the windmills, refrigeration, ice, the lute, the precursor to the guitar. Like Iran was one of the first global civilizations. So obviously at that era, as they're figuring out math and science and all that, they were the ones, leading the way. So we did that. And then I kind of didn't want to push it. I was like, okay, we did one, thank you, even though it's my company. This is like my style. It was like very Tarofi. I was like, okay, thank you, let's move on. But then as Nowruz, which is the first day of spring, came again this year, I was like, you know what? I wouldn't mind doing something influential Iranians. And that one, I'll have to touch on politics because some of the most influential Iranians were obviously political leaders, heads of state. I was like, but it was really to showcase both, like, Ferdowsi, who wrote the Shahnameh, the book of kings. He is the reason, to a large extent, why when the Arab Muslims started to spread out from the Arabic Peninsula, when they would go to like Egypt and all these other places and convert people, those languages would generally be replaced by Arabic. It's not a coincidence. Like in Egypt, there were Coptic Christians, and now it's Arabs who use the Arabic alphabet. But in Iran, because it's a totally different like it's a different culture. It's nothing wrong. Like Iranians were actually Indo-European. If I were to answer a census in the like Canadian, like I would be counted as white, even though I don't consider myself white like you for socio, whatever reasons. It's nothing bad, but I kind of view myself as a bit of an outsider. But whereas Arabs are Semitic, like Jewish people, ironically, they're cousins that they want to kill each other. But anyway, so
complicated.
Very complicated. But in Iran, the reason why we preserved, our language was, our culture was because of our language, our music, our books, our food. And so, but there is obviously Arabic influence, there's a percentage, but Iranians are actually not religious the way most Arab Muslims are. We converted. Obviously, religion is usually not all voluntary. That's the history of conquest, and it is what it is. But so in the influential Iranians, which people really liked as well, I could see, oh, wait, Ash, this is what you were saying. You started to tweet about Iran. You started to write articles. You're starting to engage with people. You got people telling you this is a great article. You have other people telling you you're an idiot for saying this. You have these people accusing you of being this. You have these people accusing you, and they're both wrong, but at least you're starting to educate yourself. Because the last thing I also want to do is to go out there and just, I'm going to make an example just for to illustrate what I wanted to avoid. If I would have come out, let's say, not knowing, listening to people, but I just read New York Times, or I just turn on CNN and listen to Christiane Amanpour, yeah, maybe I walk away with the conclusion that the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, is the defender of Iran and Iranians, when, okay, maybe a percentage of Iranians feel that way, but there's definitely a very considerable material plurality, majority, I don't know, it's hard, but there is definitely we'll just leave it at that, a material amount of people that are like, no, this guy, he's not Iranian the way that like our history was. And it's just fascinating because, and I wrote about this, I had all these misconceptions. And so my point is, I, who am a history guy, I am Iranian. I myself was like, okay, so where I'm getting at is, after the successful Iranians, then I would actually even answer in Farsi to some people, like in English alphabet. And people, when I would see some Iranians, and again, we have like 25 million subscribers. So even if like 1% of 1% of 1%, it's a sufficient number of people who are like, wait, who is this? Is this like the WatchMojo admin? And I wasn't like, oh, I'm the founder. It was just, but I had this source of pride. It was like fun. It made my job fun again, right? It was like an interesting topic. So then we followed it up with a versus, Cyrus the Great versus Alexander, which I wrote. I mean, when I wrote my second book on Alexander, my wife is Greek. So the Greeks kind of embraced and adopted me through, let's say, marriage, like very symbolic of how things used to be. So when I wrote the book, they weren't like, why are you Zeno writing about our Alexander? You know, but so that was fine because they viewed it as like a sign of respect. I'm not Machiavellian, but one reason I was really interested in Alexander was not just the Iron Maiden song. I don't like what he did to ancient Persia. He destroyed Persepolis to avenge Xerxes burning Athens in 480 BC. But it was mainly when I was reading about Alexander, I was fascinated that aside from his influences being Aristotle, Achilles, his father Philip, Zeus, one of his big influences was Cyrus the Great. Kurosh Kabir, Kurosh Bozorg. So Cyrus the Great, and I'm not biased. I mean, people that know me know, like, I try to be objective. I try to be fair. Even when we did Cyrus versus Alexander, I was telling the team, I'm like, I want you to go run the numbers, revisit this. What categories does Alexander win? So it's not just like, oh, shocking, this Iruni guy did this video. I was like, I tested AI, I tested everything. And I was like, yeah, Alexander was the military guy. He was just, no disrespect, I love Alexander for his good thought. He had many flaws. But I was like, Alexander was a conqueror and a military guy, a commander, but he ultimately was a destroyer. Like, he basically just was like, you are now my bitch, or I'm going to kill you type of thing. But, my boy Cyrus, he was like, if you just, become allegiant to me and loyal to me, I'll spare you. But really, Cyrus was somebody that influenced not just Alexander, but Aristotle. He influenced Thomas Jefferson. He influenced the Romans. He influenced pretty much everything. His Cyrus Cylinder was the first Declaration of Independence, right? Of human rights, sorry. And while you cannot say that influenced directly the Declaration of Independence, the through line is pretty clear. Like, he influenced Voltaire, the era of Lumière and Enlightenment. So anyway, I've noticed now that whenever I read a quote from Cyrus the Great, I'm like, Jesus Christ. I'm like, this is like exactly what I strive to be. It's hard to be this fair, but it's not like this subconscious thing. It's because he influenced everybody else afterwards.
Yeah.
He was the first king or ruler, head of state. He was the first leader of a global empire, and it was like a trickle. And so he was more of a builder, et cetera, et cetera. So when that happened, first of all, on YouTube, everybody was super appreciative and they loved it and I saw it. But I also kind of then felt a bit more confident that I go, you know what? Why was WatchMojo successful? Because you listen to your gut, you listen to your instincts. You don't worry about the critics, the people that, like, who cares? So we embrace like top 10s, we embrace geek culture, pop culture. So it's like a lot of the patterns. So I'm like, okay, if we were to basically bring back a WatchMojo Iran 2.0, it's not Farsi, so I'm not going to use that word. And Persia is, I'm Persian, I'm super proud, but Persia is not a disrespect, but it doesn't include what
doesn't represent the entire country.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm like, it has to be a WatchMojo Iran 2.0. It does not need to be Mojo related, and it does not need to be only video. You could have podcasts. You could have Inside Iran.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody's interested, I may do that, especially in the run up to the World Cup. It would be fine if there was a segment on sports, talk about music, talk about a little bit of news, like not political, but just what's happening. Like right now, the US and Iran are in negotiations that are going to shape the future of Iran. It's Trump is erratic. I mean, I've written about these. You could check my Twitter X account under articles where I cover this a lot, and on Context is King. But the idea is multimedia 2025. Some podcasts, some articles, some social, a lot of videos, but not only videos. It could live on YouTube. We could launch a fast channel, yada, yada. But so the next one that I greenlit, which I thought would be so like out of left field, was basically what turned out to be my favorite video that I've ever produced, which is the top 10 songs from Iranian Persian music,
right.
Which is really hard because, again, we're crazy. We could do top 10 American songs, but if you do rock, well, you got UK, some German songs, some American, and maybe some Canadian. And then the eras, if you're comparing really like Guns N' Roses' Appetite to Destruction to Hey Jude, which we have done, it's a bit jarring. Again, I like
you
that.
got to kind of break it down into smaller categories.
Also genres. Imagine you show Aretha Franklin and then you cut to Metallica. So my point is, this was really challenging, but it was, again, curation. I wanted to kind of take a sample of different genres, different sounds. It's coming out any day now. I've been hounding the team, and I preface it. I'm like, I'm just asking as a kid before Christmas, when is this video coming back? Because, I was part of the research team. And so that I think is going to be like, again, I like to surprise our audience. There are some people, especially with Ed Sheeran, the name of his song, Azizan, is like my dear, my sweetheart, whatever. So I'm like somebody who's maybe did not see the Cyrus or the influential. They just come and they come to WatchMojo expecting like Batman or something. And it's like, top 10 Iranian music? They're like, am I dreaming? What is happening? Anyway, so I think that is an example, not for anybody. That's the point. You got to balance the macro with yourself. And I'm like, there's like no money in Iran near term. It's a tough market. It's a huge market. But again, it's the same playbook. If you have your principles, if you find your purpose, and then you have the passion for it, that's what you should be like. That's the checklist. That's what you should pursue, because I'd be willing to cover this and bring on. The other thing I wanted to do was promote some creators who are Iranian, who cover sports, who cover whatever. And there's so many great creators even in Iran that cover the food and the nature and the geography.
Yeah.
So I have basically a model that I'm emerging. And then before we log off, I want to throw out some names so people could give me feedback. But the whole idea is it'll be a mix of, think of it as a pyramid, a little bit of creation, a lot of curation and aggregation. So showcasing different creators. Like, hey, if you're interested in more on Iranian food, check out this guy. His videos are fogolade, and so now I'm kind of excited about that, and we'll see if I move on to something else, or if there's a lot of creators who are interested, who would want to kind of use that WatchMojo Iran 2.0 as like a platform, then mission accomplished. Like,
cool.
I'm good.
And we can include your inside pitch document in the link to this video for anybody who wants to pitch.
We should and we could, but I already created one dedicated for the Iranian channel.
Awesome. So we can link to that in the description for this. You mentioned the name. Let's talk about that. Is there a specific direction that you're looking at with the name of this channel, or is there?
Let's start general. I'm always like, there's no, whether you believe in Allah, Yahweh, God, whatever or not, there's no God-given decree that everything has to be Mojo, right?
Yeah.
So already, I don't think it needs to be Iran Mojo or whatever. So one name that I liked was, there are plays on words, like, you could kind of like draft off what watch is, like, which is not watch your watch. It's like to view. So like when I start to research and whatever, but I'll just cut to the chase instead of giving other names. I rather than just call to the audience and be like, if you think this is a bad name. I thought of a lot of iterations. I thought of a lot of words, and I may put them in the comments for people to then run with. but I was like, I felt it was forced. I felt they were all like, Homer Simpson's car, just like convoluted. The one that he designs, his brother was an executive. It's like 30 years ago, the episode. I reference it still to this day. But then I was like, I don't know what triggered this, but I know what triggered this. So yesterday, Donald Trump, who again just sits on his toilet and farts ideas, and people think it's policy. I'm like, it's not policy. There's just noise, distraction. So yesterday, because he's headed over to the Arab states, he's like, I'm going to rename the Persian Gulf that's been there. There's books that go back 3,000 years that reference it as Persian Gulf. And he goes, I'm going to rename it the Arabic Gulf, which is nonsense, but it's fine. It's like there's an Arabian Sea. And it's been the Persian Gulf and the Caspian Sea on top, but it's fine. It was clearly a pandering move to the Arab states that he's visiting, but it was also as he's negotiating with Iran about, the JCPOA style deal for nuclear matters. I think it's both of that. Now, naturally, the Iranians were very hurt and upset. Many of them overwhelmingly in America were pro-Trump. So right now, like, they're having some issues coming to grips with that, and that's fine. I'm not making fun of anybody. I'm just saying, yeah, I told you, like, Trump is not what you think he is.
There's a little bit of regret happening.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's regret, because they still are like, Biden would have been worse, which I'm like, I don't see how, because if Biden would have done any of this, or the Democrats, that you guys would have, like, not just you guys, everybody, like America, journalism, the checks and balances of everything he's done. But begs at him, we don't need to go too deep in that front. The key was, as people were like tweeting things online, begging Donald Trump, and I was like, guys, don't make that big of a deal with this. This too shall pass type of thing. I came across, again, a quote. I was researching for my own, something I'd written about Trump. But I landed on quotes from Cyrus the Great. That's why this all coming together. And I was like, wow, like, this guy was ahead of his time, and some of it could have been an act. When you're a leader, you do have to, unfortunately, sometimes, you're pure, like 99% of the time, you're sincere. Sometimes you do have to play statesman and diplomat. That is just the way it has to be. But at the core, he was like the greatest leader. I get that. So as I was reading these quotes, I was like, you know what? I had a flashback to when John F. Kennedy Jr., before he passed away in a plane crash, he actually dabbled in media, and he launched a magazine. What was the name of that magazine, do you think?
I know the answer, because I've seen the link that you put here. But for anybody in the audience, why don't you just
tell me the name?
Just tell me the name of the magazine.
Yvonne, you could put up the image if you don't mind. So he called it George as a nod to George Washington, the founder of America. So as I sat there, I was like, I'm trying to convey really this sense of like pride in Iran's history, its culture, its language, even if this will be in English, and all of that. So I was like, I should just call it something around Cyrus. Now, whether I decide to go with Kurosh or Cyrus, that's a detail. It's up to the people. But I was like, it'll be a play off of Cyrus. I have a name in mind. I won't announce it yet. Because, you have to check like URLs, you have to check some trademark things, you have to check social handles. But so I'm like, yeah, it could just basically be a play on that. But so whether or not this is just like a slow burn, little bit here and there that is like, yeah, it's content for WatchMojo, or I'm like, no, we're going to make this like WatchMojo Espanol, which has 8 million subscribers. And look, Iran is a country, like I said, 90 million people, 5-10 million diaspora. It's 100 million. So if I was like an investor, somebody came to me, the TAM, total addressable market, that would actually be small to an investor. They'd be like 100 million. Even if you get 10% of that, 10 million, it's not a business. I get that. But clearly, as I say, you focus on content, you build a community, then I know how to make the commerce work, right? But that's not really, obviously, this is more of a pride and whatnot. Yeah. So it's funny that in this journey of these shows, I was trying to figure out what to do. I'm more out of a sense of obligation and duty and pride, but also I'm like, I've helped a lot of people, Kharijis. I'm like, it would be nice. I would get a lot of personal benefit, not tangible. I would just get a lot of intangible, like, satisfaction from helping younger, like, Ashes who are producing content, and they're like, yeah, it's cluttered. How do I stand out? So came full circle.
Yeah, and in my opinion, it has a better chance of success because of the authenticity element, that it's coming from you. You have that background. Those are your roots, and it all comes back to the roots that we were talking about.
There you go. It all makes sense now.
Yes, our poll results are in. We asked, how important are your roots to you? And our audience, 61% said very important. They're connected to their roots. 20% said somewhat important. 14% said not all that important. And only 2% said not important at all. So most of our audience does have some connection to their roots. I know that's a general term. It means something different to everybody, but there you go.
Well, I mean, I touched on this last night. I saw a gal who's a very good writer, actually. She's really I like to think I'm a good writer. So when I come across somebody that writes well, researches well, and she posted on a couple of Iranian entrepreneurs and business people to, again, be like, look at the contribution our people do, and how could you disrespect this Mr. President Trump? And I was like, oh yeah, I have this post that I had in my drafts for a while where I'd start to research the top Iranian entrepreneurs and like C-level executives. And then I was like, just went on a rampage and I wrote, like, again, probably knowing me, like a 5,000 word article that I posted. But that one I do explain how I and why. Yeah, like if you scroll down, actually scroll down if you don't mind. So this is actually the Grand Bazaar in Tehran, which I'm assuming I probably visited at least once. No, but go back to the article. Just I said scroll down if you don't mind. I just want to. So there's a lot of entrepreneurs like Pierre Omidyar, who's a French Iranian. He started eBay. Omid Kordestani was Google's chief business officer, rock star. The Uber CEO right now is scroll down, please. The Uber CEO is Iranian. Another couple of big names. Yeah, like Box.com. Anyway, on and on and on. But in that article, I kind of talk a little bit about why when I came, I turned my back. And it's kind of 180 degree how much in the last year I've kind of leaned in, listened, embraced. And so your word is that it's authenticity, It's like, nobody can question that. Anyway.
Yeah, definitely. You have another cool story about your roots, which relates to, I guess, your roots as an entrepreneur, as it is.
Yeah, I mean, again, like we've talked about this, but I think, this is kind of a tangent to something else. So, like, there's two types of there's many types. There's two types of entrepreneurs, and they're both fine. There are those that are like born on third base. Rupert Murdoch, his dad had newspapers. He took them over. William Randolph Hearst borrowed $10 million from his mom. And then there are those that are called so-called self-made people. I don't think I'm self-made. I think compared to that group, sure. But what I always tell entrepreneurs is, like, you still stand on other people's shoulders.
Yeah,
you
for
still
sure.
have a team. And in my case, like, to connect the dots, like, one of the things when I started to lean into this community was I always knew this. I always had the gratitude. But I developed a far better appreciation of like how easy it was for us to leave after the 1979 Islamic Revolution. My dad worked for the Spanish embassy. So when we went to Spain and then we traveled to Canada, for him, he wanted to be an entrepreneur. I'd never heard that word. I had no idea what it was. In 1987, I was just standing outside. And I don't know if my dad gave me a card or his business card fell. I picked it up. And that was the first time I saw entrepreneur. No idea what it meant. And like decades went by, and lo and behold, I kind of followed in his footsteps to become an entrepreneur myself.
But you remembered that moment specifically.
I remember vividly. It was summer. It was this is from Fox in the Hen House. This was pre-AI and we didn't have. But so this is our previous designer. He was like, how can I do this? And it was basically, it stuck with me to this day. It was like an afternoon. It was like, oh, there we go. That's me with a bit more hair.
The young Def Leppard fan.
It's funny. That's 1989. It's crazy. And that's not me. That's just from the documentary. But so ultimately, there are very few things that I personally if any employee, any colleague, any entrepreneur came and they were really, really excited and they had the right profile, obviously, if they meet certain things, I would be all for supporting them. I get such oh my God. Okay, we can stop this there. This is the Ernst. Oh, that's the Ernst & Young.
We also have a very nice picture of your father that we can throw up.
Oh, yeah, okay. So no, that's not my father. That's Hugh Hefner. So okay,
there it is.
So this is a picture. So this is oh my God, how much time do we have? Let's make this brief. This is the late 70s. Well, first of all, who do you think is my dad? I mean, it's kind of, it gives it away there.
Well, I mean, I would assume it's the taller man with the mustache.
Yeah, with the mustache. That Mustaki is quite so. But there's somebody more with greater distinction, noteworthy. If you give me 30 seconds. So this is the late 70s. My dad probably at this point was actually working for the Hotel Intercontinental. The key is he was a polyglot. He is a polyglot. He spoke many languages. He actually wanted us to go to Germany, but he worked for the Spanish government. And so this is the late 70s. So what's happening is the two gentlemen in the middle are Peruvian musicians that had been invited to Iran to perform. But the lady to the left, that is actually the wife, the queen of Iran at the time. That is the wife of Mohammad Reza Shah. He was not full-time her translator, but his side hustle was basically, because he spoke English, French, German, many languages. So this was like in the late 70s. And then obviously in 1979, we could move on from this picture. From 1979, there was the Islamic Revolution, which for a few reasons, but ultimately the religious class of society, they had some like growing resentment, and I've written articles about this, you could read it. They kind of joined forces with the Marxists to basically topple the government and the monarchy, which in Iran was all of its history was basically a monarchy. And as a guy who's like written about leaders and all that, I've always looked at people. I don't really put that much emphasis on the form of government. You know, like if I'm comparing Prime Minister Mark Carney with President Donald Trump, yes, obviously I know about the form of government, but I'm really commenting on the people, their character and all that. But so long story short, after 1979, things changed. And my family, we were not actually political. My dad, even growing up, was neither for monarchy or against. He actually hated all politics. He saw what politics did to the country. But yeah, no, so it's kind of just interesting, full circle, that, I'm now like covering this universe. Even if I used to joke, I go, my dad used to be like, we brought you here so you don't get involved in politics. So I was afraid that like when he saw me actually even just like listen and write about history and all that, I was like, he's probably going to be like a bit disappointed. But when I told him, I'm like, yeah, I go, I'm leaning in, I'm covering this world. I go, because he was like, well, why are you doing it? He's like, well, first of all, he was like happy. He's like, no, it's good. He was like, you write a lot. He's like, it's good that you're embracing your history and culture. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, I said, if I'm at WatchMojo and let's say we're doing top 10 80s hard rock or top 10 greatest whatever, sandwiches, I go, I take it seriously and I want to have the right answer and I have to research it, right? So I was like, people are asking me more and more about Iran. And I saw what's happening now. I saw this 2 years ago. I'm like, Iran is going to be more and more in the news. It's on a collision course to either clash or somehow normalize. It's not up to me. I'm just a nobody here. But I was like, I don't like that I don't feel like I really know what's going on right now. I was like, I kind of feel like I'm repeating what the New York Times writes, or I'm like repeating what, and I'll land here, what like, again, CNN says. So for me, it was that same personality trait of wanting to be objective and accurate, and if I'm wrong, be corrected, and get the facts right, so to speak, because that's how you build credibility and that's how you build authenticity. But I won't lie, and I'll land it here, is when I started to engage with people, like I managed to unite everybody in how the people on this side accuse me of that and the people on this side accuse me of that, and it's like they all kind of were like easy target. But it's good. I've learned my lesson, and I'm just like in my own little world now. Anyway.
Cool. Well, Ash, this was a really fun episode. It was kind of different, and I enjoyed talking about these potential future projects. So
we're almost done. So the documentary should be it's brewing, but mainly is if anybody, whether it's a dakhele company, like inside of the company or outside of the company, is like, hey, I wouldn't mind taking this inside something franchise. So if somebody is a guru or expert about AI and they want to do inside AI, that's an option. If somebody wants to do inside Iran or inside Team Melli, I'm just throwing some seeds here. by all means. And then, yeah, so I'll reshare the link to the WatchMojo Iran 2.0.
Mm-hmm.
I'll share some ideas for the names. I'm open to anything. And yeah, so this, you may never hear about this again, or if people are interested, we may move rather quickly, because I'm good at seeing when there's a little bit of, when there's a little bit of spark that turns into a fire.
Yeah, getting to know
and the Phoenix is WatchMojo Iran 2.0, our channel. It's rising from the
ashes. Yeah. Got it. Yep. If something I've discovered about you, getting to know you a little better, is when you get really interested in something, you dive in completely headfirst. So that's a good quality, I think.
Yeah. So it's a quality, I'll give you that. Whether or not it's good or bad, I don't know.
We've got 3 episodes left to go, or 4 actually. I don't know if the documentary is going to be episode 20 or...
to be honest, the documentary is advancing, because we're smart about how we proceeded, because both the Web Summit presentation in Rio gave me good B-roll, and frankly, just this journey with you and my new girlfriend, the
Chastity, or whatever her name is.
Basically. We also have a lot of good sound bites. So I've been actually working with Joe also on this podcast, helping this come true. So it's just a little bit of like mapping of like what's missing, what should I do VO, is there some B-roll that we want to do? And oh, look at that. I just received notice that the WatchMojo Iranian Persian songs is back for me to review and quality control. So
excellent.
It's coming out soon. So excited. All right.
Yep. Next week's episode 17, we'll be talking about how YouTube won AVOD and Netflix is winning SVOD. So advertising versus subscription-based video. What happens next? So stay tuned for that next week.
Come back next week. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Cheers.
Have a good one.
Bye. Thanks, guys.